one conversation that really never ends is whether you should really go to university or not. So there are people who advise you to go there and get a stable job, and other people say that it's just a scam to make you a corporate slave. This entire discussion is usually colored from the point of view of Americans, but for Europeans the whole value proposition is also very different. So I figured, why not give the opinion of someone who studied in Europe? And for that, let me introduce myself. I'm Ismail Cemataş. I grew up in Germany. I also started to study here, but that's only really the start of my complicated relationship with the university. First of all, studying was both the best and one of the worst decisions that I made. I started to study in Germany, philosophy for a year, which essentially was wasted time. I studied 2 years in business administration at another city. Then I switched to Amsterdam and I started to study psychology, which I also finished, and continued with the business administration master. And now I'm a consultant, and I even started to study another discipline, cybersecurity in this context, which I find really interesting, and it's more a hobby thing. But I had so many different impressions, so I figured it might be good to give an overview on all the different factors that I find important, and there are 3 that especially stick out to me. The first area you should really focus on, which is also the most straightforward one, is the professional life and how it's impacted by your choice of university. Now, truth be told, you can learn almost all of the things that we were taught in university on your own if you have an extreme amount of dedication. But usually this is not the case. Even if it's the case, there is still some amount of specialized knowledge that your specific university has, because some professors conduct their research there and you might have access to them. Let's say that you have a lot of energy and you want to look into this. One thing that you would have to do is gain an overview on an entire field. So for example, what are the essential studies? What are the essential developments? What are the future developments? Who are known professors in that field? And are there some things that are posed as right but are actually wrong? Essentially, you need to map out an entire field, and this is not easy. What a university does, if it's done correctly, it gives you great understanding on the breadth of knowledge in that field you're studying. If you, for example, would start just analyzing psychological research, you might think like, oh, okay, this research paper seems nice, it is presented nicely, but if you then learn the proper methodology behind analyzing certain papers, you would then later on find out that this is not the case. And for some people, if you study on your own, maybe this point might not even occur. That being said, I think there still needs to be quite the interest on your end to learn that breadth of knowledge, because if there is not so much of an interest given there, then you will be very overburdened with the amount of information that is presented and required to learn. Another thing is, regarding your professional life, there are certain things, specifically internships and also working student positions, which are kind of gate-kept from the rest of society. Those are positions actually put in for students, and obviously the companies profit because they only pay a certain amount, but especially when it comes to the working student positions, they pay a decent chunk of hourly salary rates. So it's not like you're slaving away, you're getting decent amount of income and you're learning in that field. On a more larger scale, certain positions are also gate-capped later on in your career if you do not have a degree. There are certain jobs that just want you to have a degree to get into them. There are also, for example, consultancies where you are not able to go to a certain level if you do not have a degree. Now, if you contrast that, for example, with doing an apprenticeship, you still get money, but it isn't as high and you don't have those unique opportunities presented to you, and maybe they're not these hindrances later on in your career. And if you would contrast that, for example, with some workshops or boot camps, these are usually costly. Those cost like a couple of €1,000. And the one thing that is a huge difference for European universities is they're just not as expensive. So while the US may pay above 100k for the degree, we pay 6k, 10k in tuition. So, for example, in Germany, it's around €300 per semester. In the Netherlands, it's around 2,300 per year. So, one bootcamp essentially is the equivalent of 1 year of studying. The value proposition, in turn, way different than in the US. But let's say in the professional realm, the two things that stick out are access and convenience. Now, for the second topic, which is almost as important as the first one, it's about your social life. First of all, it kind of depends on which type of university you go to. If, for example, like right now, where I work remote, I might have contact with 5 people because I chat with them, or there's some people in my vicinity who I can meet up with. If you go to a smaller city, you might hang out with 2 people from like study groups. But if you compare that with my experience in Amsterdam, where in the same study you're going to, it's 600 people who are studying with you, then it's a whole different experience. And if you go to university, which has a lot of people, then you have the benefit, the huge benefit of having as many people that are in a similar position as you will probably never have in your life again. For example, in an apprenticeship, or if you're working on something on your own, you're surrounded by maybe 5 or 10 people. And with the university, you can imagine that even if half of them drop out, as they did with us, you can still count 300 people, your peers, for 3 years. Those are so many people you can interact with and have a deep connection with over a long period of time, or just see what type of people you mesh with and with who not. On a similar note, there's also a way higher frequency of social meetups in the context of the university, especially in bigger universities. So there are certain groups, there are associations, but there are also just people that you talk to, that talk to other people, and then you just create a group and you go out. In an apprenticeship, for example, most of the people are already settled in the company, and if you work on your own, then it's a similar environment as if you would start to work after university or where you're already in your regular life. Now, this doesn't mean that you will not be able to socialize with a lot of people, but it will take way more of an active effort and also time to get the same amount of social experience and interactions as you would do in a university setting. And if you go to a university that is larger and it also has a larger population of international students, you have the great benefit of meeting people from all types of different cultures. I mean, people from France, England, but also further away, from Russia, Americans, people from China. And it was so interesting to see how people are in a work group setting, but also how they crack jokes and in general talk about their experiences. Now, I must say that even though there's a large amount of opportunities to socialize, you still need to put in a certain amount of work to socialize. And if you're the type of person who likes to overthink, this might even cause a bit of stress, because there's so many people who are socializing. And if you're thinking about, hey, I am not socializing as much, this can create stress with some people. I know for me it was that way for a certain amount of time. Similarly, if you're prone to overwork in a sense, you might kind of retreat from social interactions because you think that, oh, you need to put in even more effort into your professional life. As so, you might not get as much value, and in a smaller, for example, apprenticeship setting, you would still interact with these people more regularly than if you would have the freedom of university, but not act on it, or act on it even less than in a smaller setting. The third aspect, which also cannot be understated, is the personal development that you experience throughout studying. When you start studying, it usually means that it is the first point in your life where you gain a lot of independence. Some people move abroad, and even if they don't, the fact that you are studying kind of gives you a free pass in society. Because if people ask you, what are you doing? You just say studying, and they say, oh, okay, nice. This freedom gives you a lot of space to develop yourself. If you use this freedom to move abroad, which I can highly recommend, you will start living on your own or living with other people. And trust me when I say you will grow so much as a person, because processes in your household or in your life that were just done by the family are things that you now appreciate way more, and also things that might have bothered you in the past regarding on how to structure your life. You're not constrained by that anymore. You have more of a freedom to design life in a way that is more fitting to you. This also means you have the freedom to explore all types of interests. You can dress how you want. You can pursue different hobbies. Usually there are a lot of people you can connect with that do something similar, and it's basically just one big exploration phase. When you're in an apprenticeship, when you're already working with certain clients, and there's only a certain amount of room you have because you already put up a certain expectation that someone you interact with on a regular basis might have, and you depend on your livelihood essentially. And another thing which was really useful for me, but this differs a lot depending on which type of university you go to, is it gives you the structure to gain discipline. Now, I talk about how you gain so much freedom. Doesn't that just mean that you also have the freedom to do nothing? Well, it does. But how does that then work out with what I just said? There are universities who have the system of you finishing your exams at the end of the semester. This means that throughout the semester, there's not as much pressure regarding assignments or exams, but you still need to keep at it. And if you do not do this, then you will be overwhelmed by the end of the semester. This is, for example, present in Germany if you study at a normal university. If you're already disciplined, this is amazing because you have so much freedom in your normal day-to-day life, and you have even more space to design your life. But if you do not have discipline yet, you will basically end up postponing, and it might feel frustrating even more because you will just have these periods where you will do very little, and then periods where you're just way overstressed and way overwhelmed. At the University of Amsterdam, for example, on the other hand, you had quite the pressure to keep at it. This was mainly done through monthly exams, some type of assignment basically every week, sometimes 2 assignments overlapping. While this might sound a lot, what it basically enabled you and what it gave you was, as long as you have the passion for your field, the interest in the topic, you were incentivized to always keep at it, and you were basically forced to get into the habit of being disciplined, working at it, and finding mechanisms that work for you to finish those exams in an appropriate manner. So in essence, the decision on whether you should go to university or not depends on which type of university you go to and how important different areas are. If professional life and the social life and personal development is important for you, but for example the social life and the personal development is way more important for you than, for example, the professional life, this would mean that it might be better to go to a bigger university where you might need to move away, but which isn't as renowned in your field. Now, that being said, if you are someone who says, I can get my social circle from other interactions in life, and I already have my social circle set, I don't need this, and with the personal development, I was always someone who was very independent, and I am already very disciplined, and I just want to excel in a specific field, then it might be worthwhile to maybe not go to university, to put in as much effort as you can into the professional field and then try to connect in other ways. But be aware that this is the harder road to take. I mean in a way where there are so many resources provided to you in a university that does the job well, which you will not have if you go your own way. Now, if you find certain networks, contacts that give you similar type of resources or even better resources, by all means, go for it. But be aware that you should be conscious of what you're sacrificing if you're going your own way, and to consider whether those sacrifices are worth it for the gain. My personal conclusion is, if I would have to recommend 18-year-old me in today's age, I would tell him study, but study at a university in person, at a large university which has appropriate funds, and optimally move away, gain independence. Because in my case, I was very undisciplined, especially before university, before I went through that path of finding the habits, finding what works for me. I struggled, and I also wasn't as independent as I thought back then. But what you should decide is which of those factors resonate with you and which don't. We have the great benefit of Europe finances being easier, so make sure that you take advantage of it. So what's your answer? What are the internal reactions that came up when I described the different points? Was it that actually I don't really need it? Then by all means, no judgment here. I wish you the very best, and I also thank you that you took the time to still watch this all the way through. If your answer was excitement, then first of all, I'm happy for you, and I would like to invite you to watch videos that I create. I'm planning on creating a university survival guide, which I will also link here as soon as it's ready. And I want to go into all those things that I found useful over those years and which are basically just a best practice guide on, for example, how to study most efficiently, on what to do right before university starts, what to do during the first weeks, and how to make the most out of your social life in university. But for now, thank you for watching, and I wish you a great remainder of the day, friends. Bye.